Chapter 4. My memories are finally returning. I woke up in a bit of a daze after my nap last night. I wrapped up my account of the day and copied it into a Reddit post, and completely messed it up in the process. I went downstairs to find Jerry cooking breakfast in the kitchen. "It's 1 a.m., why are you making breakfast?" "Only thing I've eaten since Sunday are those frozen dinners and a McChicken I grabbed on the way back from the hospital. I need some energy." He sat 2 plates down on the table. "Come on and eat. How are you feeling about everything?" He asked me after we had taken a few bites. "Still confused, still not really able to accept what you said yesterday." I thought a bit while I was cooking. "Dad should really tell you most of the story, but we don't have that luxury. If you think you can keep it together, I'd like to give you an idea of what I think is going on." I felt relief wash over me. Jerry had given me some answers last night, but I had only wound up with more questions. Jerry smiled and let out a laugh. "I'll take that as an agreement then. Better you know before we go downstairs anyway." He took a swig of coffee. "All right then. Where do I begin?" "Ruth, probably. Mom and Dad had been wanting kids long before we came around. I'm not sure of the circumstance, but I know that when Dad found Ruth, she was in danger. Ruth isn't normal. You may be familiar with some folk tales about shapeshifters, changelings, mimics, the Headley Cow. That partially covers her abilities. Dad told me he's been looking for years, and the closest things he's found are stories about Greco-Roman gods and a 13th century folktale from the Black Forest about something it called a Fleischbildhauer. That loosely translates into a flesh sculptor. Now that name is terrifying, but just about covers what Ruth can do. She not only can shapeshift herself, she can change other organic matter or rip it apart for that matter. That manuscript was recovered in an abandoned village about 200 years after it's dated. The story is a bit long-winded, but basically it goes like this. A strange woman moves to town. Strange things start happening shortly afterwards. They start out fairly normal, like valuables going missing or people going missing in the woods. Things escalate into people growling like wolves and going feral, an oak tree appearing overnight in the middle of a missing person's house, and culminating with a rather grotesque description of one of the town council members mostly turning into a cloud of flower petals. Well, as per the tradition of the era, the woman was branded a witch and the council was organizing a raid to take place on the night the manuscript was apparently written. The manuscript would serve as a record of her crimes. As a footnote, it mentions that one of the local children had claimed that he was encouraged to go up to her house as a game, and he witnessed her turn into a human from the shape of a squirrel. He stated he witnessed one of his less fortunate friends get turned into a pig. The pig boy in question had been missing for a few weeks, and this served as proof enough to convict the woman. The mention of a flesh sculptor is only used in the boy's account. An addendum is added by the soldiers who found the town 200 years later, stating the town was abandoned, but there was a tree that appeared older than the others growing straight through one of the houses. There was a field of blood-red roses growing outside the house the manuscript described as belonging to the witch. The addendum references some other similar documents from the same time and region, but Dad could never find what happened to them. Whoever the addendum was addressing seemed to have been looking for information on the topic. Whatever she is, they seem to either be extremely rare or extremely good at covering their tracks, which isn't too hard to imagine. Dad thinks it's a combination of both. I don't understand all of the science, but he's run some simulations based on Ruth's growth rate. Those, combined with his best guesses at tracing the woman mentioned in the manuscript through time, seem to imply they easily could live over 500 years. If that's the case, and they're not being killed in mass quantities, then there are either thousands of them living among us or they have a very low birth rate. Really, either one is feasible, but I hope it's the latter. You see, Ruth is at least 20 years older than us, but her physical and mental development is closer to a 9-year-old. I was struck silent as he was explaining, but I couldn't resist cracking a joke. So she's what, Baby Yoda? I know you're kidding, but you're not far off. Some people were trying to track her down for research or to use her as a weapon, I'm not sure. Possibly they just wanted to eliminate a threat. Dad and Smiles got to her first. If she's what you said, how did they get her? Wouldn't she just rip them apart? Well, the way I understand it, she gave Smiles his scarf before Dad could calm her down. And Dad didn't get hurt? Is he normal? From what he told me, he's a normal human. For some reason, though, this supernatural stuff seems to have less of an effect on him. That is more common than you'd think, although his immunity seems to be almost complete. I don't think he's inhuman though. Well, what about the rest of us? If Ruth is adopted, are the rest of us? I have no clue about the rest of you, but I told you I'm not normal. I wasn't really adopted, though. I was normal and then I died. Dad won't tell me how I died, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ruth was involved. She was basically an only child before I was born, and she didn't like sharing attention. Ruth is a little unstable. She doesn't understand ethics yet, which is why I didn't want to bring her to Disney. I thought she was down there posing as me, but if so, then who's up here copying you? Okay. Let's say I believe you died. What, 5 minutes and then they resuscitated you? Oh, they resuscitated me all right, 2 years later in a different body. I'll tell you the story, but it's the last one. We need to get down to the basement. I died, and I don't remember anything that happened until I landed in this body. Dad tells me I started haunting the house, playing with my toys. I can only assume my death was traumatic because I don't think peacefully slipping off creates poltergeists. Dad went kind of crazy and tried to straight up Frankenstein's monster me a few times, but it didn't work. Ruth saw how upset Mom and Dad were and wanted to fix it. She snuck into the basement and found a creature that Dad had been having a hard time training. She used her abilities to make it into a replica of my body and copied whatever Dad had done to try to draw my spirit into it. It worked, but it took me a while to get control. I didn't start consciously thinking until a week after I was trapped in here. After that, it still wasn't easy. This body doesn't work like a normal body, even if it looks like it, and I'm not the only one here. The creature she used is still in here with me, and if I lose control, it gets it back. So what creature did she use? Is it really important? He blushed, I nodded, smirking. Have you ever heard of a cockatrice? It's what happens when a snake hatches a chicken's egg. I always knew you were a chicken. And I always knew you were an idiot, he laughed. Come on, we have to get going. Wait, what about me? Am I adopted? You were here by the time I was revived, so I can't be sure. I wouldn't worry, though. You're the spitting image of Dad. Also, that venom I pulled from you yesterday should have immediately killed you, but you just got some swelling. We cleaned up our breakfast and headed towards the office. The doorbell rang. Twice. 3 times. Who is ringing the doorbell at 2 a.m.? I asked him. Nobody. That's the security system trying to distract us. What the hell kind of security system was this? Oh. Okay, I guess I said, and followed him to the office. He cracked the door and I broke the salt line. You still can't see the basement door? He asked. Just wall. How about now? He asked as he mimed opening the door. Nope. Just try walking at it slowly. Once you pass through the threshold, you should be able to see, but it opens to the stairs, so don't just barge through. I walked into the wall, then turned to see my brother pulling a door open next to me. "That's for calling me a chicken, asshat." He laughed. I had to laugh too. He got me fair and square. We were off to the basement. As we walked down the steps, the lights clicked on, and I realized that the basement was a misnomer. This place was more of an underground facility. There were computers and cages and massive aquariums. Most of the enclosures sat empty, but I could already see a few specimens. There was a creature in one tank that looked like a giant goldfish, but with arms. There was a man with eyes that looked like burning coals and emitted black puffs of smoke with each exhalation. There were two big fuzzy guys in adjacent enclosures that looked basically the same, but one had a brown coat and the other a white one. Their environments looked to be different as well. There was a creature that looked like a reptile in the shape of a human-sized fly. There was a man who looked entirely normal, just staring at me without blinking. There was a creature wearing a red mask and pants, with a blue, scaly body. It stood upright, but had arms that ended in hook shapes and 6 legs that ended in spikes. I wondered where he bought the pants. Near the base of the stairs, there was a security station Jerry was sitting at, flicking through camera views. He hit a button and the doorbell stopped ringing upstairs. A few minutes later, another Jerry came walking from somewhere in the basement. I freaked out and looked to the original Jerry, the OJ, if you will. Calm down. He's part of the security system too. New Jerry walked past me and took his place in a nook behind the OJ. I noticed now that my mom and dad were also in the nook, motionless. "How many of you are there running around here?" I shouted at him, laughing. Dad added me to his robot collection when we moved here during the pandemic. I'm not really sure why they have to look like us. It's kind of creepy. Satisfied with whatever he had seen on the cameras, Jerry got up and started walking through one of the aisles between the enclosures. I followed. "Stay close. Dad only keeps things in here that aren't safe to have loose on the property." I didn't see any breakouts, but be on your toes. I hope that didn't mean there were safe creatures running around upstairs too. We turned left once, right twice, and then I lost track. I was going to be trapped down here if I lost Jerry, in the most dangerous zoo in the world. We reached our destination, a plexiglass enclosure that had seen better days. A large hole was melted in the center, a bed inside was flipped on its side. A placard on the front read Ruth. "This is wrong." Jerry said the hole is burned from the outside. The lights cut out for a second, then a generator kicked in somewhere and emergency lights sprung into gear. I was looking at a grinning copy of me. It spoke in a quivering voice. "WW where H have YY you taken her now, filth? I'm getting really sick of this, Jerry." I called out to my brother. "Ruth Hannah. We are your brothers." "Knock off me," snapped its head towards my brother, sniffing the air in a way that made my stomach turn. "Why you are all wrong." It raised its hand at him. TSK, WRWR wrong body, WRWR wrong tongue. "LL let's fix you." Jerry screamed. A firecracker sound popped off as he contorted unnaturally and fell to the ground in a heap. His scream turned to a gurgle as I stood frozen watching him. His left arm snapped up into the air as it elongated. His right arm joined it, pulling him up to his knees as if suspended by ropes, as his head lolled lifelessly forward. His skin flaked off like a reptile molting its skin. Underneath, forest green scales poked through. His hands were soon replaced by claws. His head snapped back and the screaming returned, this time in the guise of a screech an eagle might make. A beak tore through his face, which slipped to the floor with a wet squelch that sounded like a piece of lasagna falling off a plate. Two great wings shot out of his back. When his transformation was complete, he looked like a small dragon, about the size of a cow, with a big chicken head, complete with a waddle. Honestly, if the transformation hadn't been so horrifying, and the situation wasn't so dire, and he didn't look like he could have torn me into pieces with his chicken beak, I would have laughed. I think he sensed that, because his chicken eyes squinted at me. "Th, that's better," the trembling voice came, slightly more cheerful than earlier. My brother opened his chicken beak and screeched at her. He dug into lunge. The creature that looked like me must have decided that looking like me was not an advantage in a fight against a giant chicken dragon, and as he pounced, the form melted backwards and began to change. The creature's transformation was much smoother than my brother's. It seemed to turn into a squirming, gelatinous ball and begin to take shape again. My brother struck at the blob with his dragon tail, trying to catch it before it reformed. The blob squished in to dodge the swipe, and then two arms erupted from it to grab his tail. The creature now was a giant cyclops, although aside from the eye it looked almost like Gossamer from the Bugs Bunny cartoons. Its claws drew blood from my brother's tail, and as he tried to turn his head to snap, the cyclops moved its claws from his tail to his throat. My brother let out a horrified clucking sound and flapped his wings up to pull away. The creature transformed again, sprouting tentacles that reached out to anchor themselves to the bars of some nearby cages. The claws around my brother's throat became tentacles too, and two more joined them to haul him down. The eye of the cyclops had become the mouth of a kraken, looking to swallow my brother. Flailing in the air, my brother squawked again, and then spit a green fluid into the kraken's open mouth. The beast screamed and released my brother. It flopped backwards and tore one of the iron bars it had been latching from its cage. The squid shrank modestly, and hurled the bar like a spear, piercing my brother's shoulder. I realized three things all at once. 1. I had been standing around, a normal dude, watching a chicken dragon fight a shape-shifting blob. 2. That shot wouldn't normally kill a chicken dragon, but if that bar was really iron, my brother was no longer in control of that beast. 3. I had no idea if that means my brother is dead for real this time. I needed to get out of there, but that last possibility crushed me. I know my extended stay away from home may seem like I don't have a great relationship with my family, but it's the opposite. Especially with Jerry. Jerry had been my cheerleader, my confidant, my best friend. He was the best big brother I could have asked for, and he proved it in this final act, fighting this creature to protect me. Jerry. I whimpered, and I began to sob. Jerry, no! I cried. The squid was morphing back into something else by now, but I didn't see it. I was on my knees wishing I could just take this back. I had to volunteer to watch the stupid house. If Mom and Dad had been here, this never would have happened. Jerry. A mournful echo ran out through the basement, but it wasn't from me. The creatures in the cages were mourning too. For Jerry? That seemed odd. I thought vaguely of the scene from that Pokemon movie where the Pokemon stop fighting their clones to cry and bring someone back to life. I don't think that was what was happening here. The blob creature was taking Jerry's human form and sobbing. Was this some form of mocking me? What the hell did this thing think it was? All that sorrow burned into anger in that moment, and the creatures in the room must have gone through the same process, because they started to roar. They were slamming against cage walls and hollering a storm. Fake Jerry must have noticed because he was looking at me now and he was pissed. Why you took her? Where is she? Oh. What the heck are you talking about? I shouted. It transformed into a blob again and I heard something drop to the floor. It was that freaking mirror again from my dad's desk. This time I'm sure I had left it in my parents' room. I went to step on it and be done with it once and for all, when the glass began to bulge. fingers formed out of the glass and gripped the frame, and a humanoid figure too large for the little mirror began to pull itself out. Great. The last thing I needed was another creature to fight. I booked it down an aisle past some of the clamoring creatures, vowing to find and kill that blob once I knew how. Before I turned the corner, I looked back to see a man made out of the mirror fighting the changeling. I refused to call it a flesh sculptor, which had taken the form of a lion of some sort. I kept running and turning until I realized I was just going to die down here. I slumped on the ground to catch my breath and I heard "Psst, this way." I snapped my head up to see Mr. Smiles peeking out from a turn up ahead and waving me on. Great. I didn't have anything better to do, so I meandered that way. Sure enough, around the corner I saw Smiles again at the end of the aisle waving. 3 more turns like that, and I saw a staircase. This wasn't the one we had come down, but I would take it. There was another security station by this stairway. There probably was one at each entry, if there were more than the 2 I had seen. I sat at the security station and clicked around. I found a good view and saw the shapeshifter still fighting the mirror man. The mirror man didn't actually show up on camera, but I assumed that was what was happening. He was putting up a good fight. I clicked around a bit more and found what I was looking for. I don't know what made me do it, but I hit release all. When it asked for the security pin, I took a shot and tried 7884. My mom had mentioned that number the other day, and I've been looking for a place to use it. Enclosures unlatched throughout the basement. Dad was going to be pissed. I got the heck out of there up the staircase. The staircase took me out of a bulkhead door on the far side of the guest house, past its farmland. It was still dark and I was outside, but I figured the most dangerous things would be about to come up that stairwell. I booked it towards the guest house and reached it in about 3 minutes of running. I kept on going past the house and onto the road between houses. I made it home a few minutes later and realized everything was locked up. I found a spare key under a potted plant and got inside, resetting the alarm. I ran through the house, into the office, and slammed the latch shut on the door to the basement. I completed the salt line, locked the office, and slid a sofa in front of the door for good measure. It was 5 a.m., time to feed the dogs. Ollie and Pork were in my room like good dogs, and after I fed them, I barricaded the door to my room and on a whim, opened my closet. There was a door in the back. I'm starting to remember. I barricaded the closet too, and then saw on Reddit that my previous post had gotten cut off when I copied it over. Thank you to the users who let me know about that. It creeped me out to think that I could have been finished in the basement and nobody would know what happened to me. I fixed that ASAP. I decided to feed the rest of the dogs so I could sleep. I should have been afraid of the creatures I had released, but somehow I knew they wouldn't be coming here. They wanted out. I guess I should warn you that if you're in Virginia, Tennessee, West Virginia, or the Carolinas, you may see some increased paranormal activity as these creatures return to their natural habitats. I cried myself to sleep and slept for about 8 hours. I woke up at 5 p.m. and wrote the update up to this point. I want to wrap up soon, but I just got off the phone with Sarah and wanted to share. I haven't been able to get a hold of you for days. What happened? I was just trying to enjoy my time with Mother and Father and did not want to spend it on the phone. Mother and Sarah Elizabeth, are you okay? A pause. I Mother and Father. Sarah Elizabeth. What? Phil? Phil, what's going on? Where Dash? Mother and Father, say hello. Say hi to Jerry. The line disconnected. Earlier this evening I went to the off-limits shelf. I was pulling out books to check the covers, mostly folklore books, and I found a thick binder with the word classified stamped on top. The 2 eyes are dotted with googly eyes. I've started reading through it, but I don't have enough info to share here yet. One last thing. As I'm laying in my bed about to go to sleep, I can hear someone playing with toys in the room across the hall. Sleep tight, Jerry.